I'm going to borrow one of the catchphrases from the cartoon, G.I. Joe, which is knowing is half the battle. I interpret it to mean in this research context, exactly what you said, that early in my career, really thought like, okay, Vera, put all your efforts into the most cutting edge methodology approach, use all the tech, and then once you're done, cool, you're done. No, that is really only half the battle. Really, the other half is taking the insights and shepherding that to the businesses and the stakeholders that kind of need that information the most, or you think will have the impact on either the product or the business or the marketing and the strategy.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Dig In podcast. I am so lucky today to be joined by Vera Chien. She is Executive Director, Global Corporate Strategy and Insights at Warner Brothers Discovery. And that is quite a mouthful of a title for a pretty big powerhouse guest I have here. So Vera, thank you so much for joining today.
Thanks so much for having me.
So I'm going to start with an impromptu question. You haven't seen this one coming. If you could live in any piece of content, so TV show, movie, whatever piece of entertainment for a month, what would you choose?
Okay, without a doubt, Lord of the Rings, that Hobbit land. I've never gone to New Zealand, but I would love to just roll around those like green hills, open the little door on the houses. So Lord of the Rings, hands down.
I love how fast you had that answer too. Like that, I could tell.
And it's one of our movies too. So,
yeah, of course.
Very, very biased.
It's a share bias for sure. So Vera, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and your role today.
Yeah, sure. So I'll start from the beginning. And I really cut my teeth at Mattel Toys. Worked there for about 11, 12 years, just rising through the ranks in the world of kind of research and insights, and ultimately led research for the flagship brands, which is Barbie and Mattel. So, obviously a lot of fun and a lot of learning, I think, in the process, and a lot of understanding around audiences, especially youth audiences. From there, I transitioned over to Microsoft and led audience insights at Xbox, overseeing insights around not only the brand I love, but accessories, other kind of Microsoft devices like HoloLens and Band. My claim to fame, or at least one of them there, was I was the first researcher on the Minecraft game.
Oh, no way.
Which always excites the little ones or the younger players. So again, a lot of interesting kind of experiences there, virtue of like tech, as well as entertainment and innovation, of course. From there, came back down to LA and am now in my current role at Warner Brothers Discovery. And so our team kind of focuses on two general buckets. One is around trying to do research and insights and analytics around helping optimize our different businesses today. So that ranges from creating TV shows to streaming services to games, all that kind of stuff. And then the other half of kind of what our team does is looking into the future and looking at opportunities for us to invest in, engage in, and play a part of. And so making sure that we are anticipating consumers' needs, where they're headed, a lot of more future forward kind of work involved in that kind of area. So a little bit of focus on today, and then the other focus is on tomorrow.
That's such a cool way to delineate that responsibility. And gosh, I get to tell my kids that I talked to the original researcher on Minecraft today. That's going to be kind of a big deal. So thanks for giving me that feather in my cap. But I can't wait to dig into some of that past experience as well. So we're going to start with, our listeners really crave inspiration from other leaders. And one of the best ways to inspire is to tell a story. And you have a really cool headline to this story that I cannot wait to dig into. It's the tale of two Xbox segmentations. And so
that's right.
Imagine what's going on here. So take us back to the beginning. What's the origination of this story?
Yeah, the tale of two Xbox segmentations. I think one of my first tasks when I joined Xbox was, here you go, you're going to do a segmentation. And, everybody knows one of the main goals of a segmentation is to kind of help identify and quantify and target very different audiences in whatever either category or area you're interested in. And so that obviously was the aspiration there. I think what we tried to do, and this is going to go into the annals of game console history a bit, but at the time, this was coming off of Xbox 360, in which there was starting to be more of a family audience for games. And so the aspiration was to continue that trajectory. And so in the first go around, the first segmentation was really quite high altitude and very, very broad. In total, just to boil it down, we did sort of a two-tiered segmentation. One for starting off by dividing audiences into essentially life stage, because that is what the data was driving us towards. Then the second tier was within each life stage, let's say families with young kids or baby boomers, whatever it might be, we then segmented them further down. So within boomers, we had, I think, 4 segments. Within parents with young kids, we had 5, things like that. And so we ultimately landed on something ridiculous like 30 segments in total, which
Quite
is,
a
of
grid.
course, breaking every single segmentation rule known to man. I think at the end result of that, and then we certainly put not only obviously a lot of time, analytics, and resources on it, but also on the back end of trying to socialize it and bring these, gosh, many, many segments kind of to life. I would say the end result of that was it was very ambitious, but what I think hindsight's 2020, and I think ultimately it was a little too abstract, a little too high of an altitude
Yeah.
for our on the ground kind of engineers, PMs, developers, and marketers to use on a day-to-day basis. I mean, we culled it down as best as we could and simplified it, but I think, again, in hindsight, it was just a little too much and too, again, high of an altitude for the day-to-day needs of my stakeholders. Fast forward, I think about like 5 years later, I'm certainly smarter and more in tune and have my pulse on my stakeholders, the teams that I'm working with, by virtue of just having been there for a little bit longer than the beginning. And so really try to apply all of those learnings and kind of postmortem insights to the second go around. I would say one of the key things in this second segmentation was just a lot more partnership and with the stakeholder teams from the get-go, and
Hmm.
making sure that we were working sort of cross-functionally across the segmentation work stream. That wasn't something I did as much in the first go around that I thought would be a much better kind of just more non-researchy but practical kind of motion kind of going forward. So that was something that we definitely did. I think another one was to, again, thinking that the last one was a little too abstract, too high altitude, making sure that we calibrate the altitude of what we were segmenting, the types of audiences, and an approach to the segmentation being a little bit more narrower, a little bit more pragmatic, and concrete, focused on the kinds of areas, ways of asking that is going to be most useful to my project managers, my engineers, my developers, all those kind of things, and making sure at the end of the day, the information was going to be as useful on sort of a day-to-day basis for them. So making sure these segments and the data behind each of those segments was going to be relevant for the Halo Studio versus the engineers on the Xbox console versus the team on Minecraft,
Hmm.
and making sure that, again, we could all try to use this kind of universal framework of understanding and talking about audiences.
Yeah.
So more kind of collaboration, more cross-functional partnership, being sort of less siloed. And while the output, we didn't spend as much resources into the flashy side of socializing, I think it was very practical and usable from day one.
Yeah.
So I think a nice kind of conclusion and kind of making up for the first one. So
Yeah.
really, really proud to have kind of landed the second one, I think, a little bit more successfully.
Yeah. Well, you shared so much that I'd love to kind of dig into a little bit because you mentioned, the segmentation, the first one, it sounds like maybe not as useful because the folks on the ground that arguably are the ones that really need to use that learning, maybe there's a disconnect there. What are some of the ways that you see those on the ground stakeholders? What are some of the ways that you can best develop that empathy for those segments with those people on the front line.
Yeah. And I think this is where the collaboration, the cross functional kind of aspect of it really helped because as we were working through the questionnaire, for example, making sure that the way we ask questions or what we were tapping into, sort of the need, the way we were talking about needs, the way we were talking about gamer motivations, the way we were talking about, how they like to play, whether they like to play solo or, with online, with friends, with team, all that kind of language and vernacular was baked in and I think that ultimately really helped make it accessible and use almost from the get-go the same language that our engineers were using, that the game developers were using. And so it was easy then, as we were reporting out the data for segment A versus B versus C, already built in is that language that they were already using internally to develop a new feature or develop a new kind of part of the game. So I think all those things really, really helped.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And how did you at the time measure the success of the rollout of a segmentation? Like, what are some of the milestones? And you're like, okay, we nailed this one.
So my information is like, how many people do I hear playing back the names of these segments?
Mhm.
And so the first time around, they kind of reverted back to like hardcore gamer or casual gamer, which was not literally not the names of our segments. They were much more nuanced than that. But I was happy to hear and kind of sense like from the second go around, a lot more playback of the names, a lot more, not just the names themselves, but understanding of at least the paragraph or the persona of the main kind of target segments. And all in all, I would say I think the segmentation, this may not sound like amazing to your audience, but I think we reached about half of the Xbox organization, which mind you was like 10,000 people at the time. So I would say for me, that was a victory compared to the first go around. So I will take half of the Xbox organization having some kind of either understanding of that the segmentation exists, they know who their target audiences are, and at least a little bit of something about it. So that maybe I'm a little short-sighted, but I thought that was for me that was a victory given like so many competing things going on with it within Xbox. So I was pretty happy with kind of the team's work on that.
Yeah, I think you should be proud about that. Absolutely. If you can have 50% of the people that are really using it, you consider that a victory. I absolutely agree. Did you have a build to that?
Yeah, and I think ultimately we were all it was coming also at a pretty kind of critical time as we were starting to think about the next generation of consoles. So a lot of the insights in that segmentation framework helped inform the development of the console that is currently out
Mhm.
today, Xbox Series S and X. So again, like being really be able to inform product development and the whole like new generation of consoles and its ecosystem obviously was really critical and being able to reach at least half of the organization. It could have been more, I don't know, but yeah, that was really something that I was really thrilled with. Obviously, I didn't do it single handedly. We had a cross functional team. My marketing partners at the time were such an incredible partner in helping to socialize and helping market externally, but also internally our segmentation. And so I have to also kind of give them a big shout out, even though this was like so many years ago, for their help and support in helping socialize the second go around of the segmentation.
Yeah. Well, that is a really important point and leads me to sort of the second part of our conversation because you have a really passionate point of view around that in itself, right? How researchers are really shepherds of the insights way past that initial report. So, talk to me about maybe first the challenge. If you don't do that job well, what happens to insights? And then maybe some of the things that you do uniquely to make sure that, insights don't die on a virtual shelf.
Yeah, no, such a great topic. Since I come from the world of toys, I'm going to borrow one of the catchphrases from the is cartoon G.I. Joe, which is knowing is half the battle. Probably half of your audience will never have heard that before. That's okay. But I interpret it to mean, or in this research context, exactly what you said. That early in my career, I really thought like, okay, Vera, put all your efforts into the most like cutting edge methodology approach, use all the tech, whatever it might be. And then once you're done, cool, you're done. As you've kind of teed up, that is really only half the battle.
Mhm.
Really the other half is taking, the insights and shepherding that to the businesses and the stakeholders that kind of need that information the most, or you think will have the impact on either the product or the business or the marketing and the strategy. And so I think the way I think about it is, after the research is done, and you should be thinking about these things even while the research is being developed,
Yeah.
even at the get-go, thinking like, what is the narrative going to be at the very least from your resulting data and insights, and how actionable are they? And I would say that is like level one,
Mhm.
making sure you have a strong narrative, making sure you have actionable insights. I think that's kind of table stakes at this point. And then the next step, after that I think can be strengthened, I think in many cases, is your recommendations and implications. I personally am the kind of person that's going to like reach always for being on the more prescriptive side, if not just to help kind of explain the insight and explain the recommendation through the usage of an example, specific tactical example of what the solution could be. And so we're going from like the what to the so what to the now what, right? And from that, it's a variety of hard skills and soft skills that really now come into play. First, are you following up with your stakeholders after your initial kind of debrief? Are you practically stalking them and following up and saying, hey, did they have any questions? Are they doing, I mean, in a nice way, of course, what are they doing with the information? Are they doing anything with it? And if they're not, kind of doing a little bit of self-reflection about what, and diagnosing amongst, the researcher themselves, like why or why not is that happening? And then, going the more formal route of then, especially for the more high profile, more strategic kind of bodies of work, thinking about workshops or other interactive ways to
Mhm.
really more formalize the kind of brainstorming process, or, strategic kind of thinking, or helping kind of craft implementation plans coming off of the research. I think, again, a balance of both soft skills and then, the more harder skills around, socializing and kind of implementation of the research.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that what's really funny as you're describing this too, Vera, on my mind. So at Day, we just commissioned our own research study. And as research suppliers, we must be the most difficult client for this agency trying to give us now a project. And I am now really living that, like, how do we deploy it? What decisions do we enact? And I'm struck by, man, if we could have refined the brief a little bit more to be more forward thinking of how are we actually going to roll this out, it would have made the total engagement, including how we captured the data, what we asked, how we analyzed it, better. Have you had some of those
Yeah.
moments where you're like, can I please go back in time and rewrite this brief?
Oh, for sure. I think we all have it. But I love the idea that, you've come to that kind of that aha. And, personally, I would love if more partners like you guys come to the table with, yes, we asked you to do XYZ research, but would love to kind of, as a sense of the thinking and the insight and the creativity, help us think through like, how could we extend the life of this?
Yeah.
What are some of the vehicles? And though that it doesn't have to be done in the same fell swoop, that could be a phase two, phase three, what have you. Actually, I know that the last brief you guys had sent over to us a bit ago kind of had that too. So
Mhm.
I love the idea. I think it's great to help the researchers even too. Like when we're so focused on answering this very specific business question, we kind of forget about the importance of, having that shelf life and having the insights. Again, especially you don't do this for every single project, of course, and every single kind of research question, but there are so many that can live on beyond once the research is done, and us thinking proactively together about how we can extend the life of it, and
Yeah.
making sure that then action is then taken, because again, everybody, I don't know about you guys and your stakeholders and the teams you work with, but folks here are really, really busy, and they don't have time to meditate and think about, okay, Vera's research, this was great, the insight was great, let me think about like a plan to how to implement this. In most cases, I'd say my stakeholders are happy to have like a very specific recommendation about what pricing, what's the best way to market this new kind of pricing structure, what is the best way to launch this specific product, all these kind
Yeah.
of things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where a lot of the LLMs can help us as well, pick up research that was done a year or more ago and say, what should we be thinking about now? What are some of the things we can influence now? And it's not that dissimilar to how you talked about Xbox. The segmentation ended up really informing future category development and,
Yeah.
the future of consoles. I mean, if we can go back to some of those research, I just feel really passionate about, we want clients to get the most value out of the research engagements, and so many things that have longer legs and maybe we might give it from the start. So I'm excited to see how technology can help us continue to do that and extract every bit of long-term value out of the research engagement. Do you think
Yeah.
that's a valuable pursuit?
Yeah, yeah, totally. I mean, unfortunately, there's just becoming more and more turn in terms of teams and compositions and reorgs across all categories. And so I think because, as people come and go, and especially people leave that have been working on a certain category or brand for a long time, they take that amazing tribal knowledge with them. And so I think this is where AI can and large language models, as you said, could really step in and assist in as employee bases get more dynamic. Nobody stays at their job now for 20 years or even 10 anymore. And so people are doing 3-year, 4-year stints either by choice or unfortunately by virtue of organizational change. And so a lot of that knowledge is then lost. So yeah, having LLMs that can absorb the corpus of a team's work over the past 10 years and kind of, harness it, I think is incredible.
Yeah. And what a way to start your career at Mattel. How many years were you there?
About 11, I think.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's so cool, and I'm sure you're
Yeah.
grateful for that experience, and wow, to
Yeah.
work on such an iconic brand. Now, when the movie came out, how are you feeling about, like, were you worried about seeing it? Were you like, "I don't know if I'm gonna" did you have feelings?
So it was full circle moment for sure. Same thing with Minecraft movie. I'm like, wait, why did I wait till all these things like all these things are coming back into my life in a wonderful way. Yeah, for both of those movies, both Barbie and Minecraft, a first initial like nervousness because especially for video games, have not had a great history of, translation from IP, game IP
Mhm.
to the big screen. And then toys, even less of a bigger, path of success, I'd say. It's just more unknown. I think the closest thing was when I worked on Barbie at the time. Every year we'd have this wonderful, amazing direct to DVD, animated movie. That was probably the extent of it, but
Mm,
never a full length feature. But once I saw the trailers for both, I was like sold. I was like this and Margot Robbie for Barbie, just and what's his name for Ken? Like both of
mhm.
them are just kind of
Gosling,
amazing actors that really
fantastic.
embraced their roles. So
Mhm.
I think both absolutely loved and cried at both.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny, and it's a good point about not all game IP translating well. We won't name some, but there have been some real misses here in the recent years. So, we'll wrap up this section with, I would love to hear your hot take on the future of the entertainment industry.
Okay, I'm gonna try and be delicate about this. Obviously, it's no secret there's been a ton of change across, mergers, acquisitions, and everything across the board. I'll stick to something more category kind of specific, and I think I've been thinking about this a lot. And streaming, like on Netflix and HBO Max and Disney Plus, it's now nearing I think 20 years old when Netflix went transitioned from kind of DVDs to streaming. YouTube also just passed 20 years, like strangely, I think last year. And so the reason why I bring those two up and what I've been thinking about lately a lot is like, okay, what is the next horizon?
Mhm.
What is the next new disruption, the next new cycle? Because these things move in like 20, generally speaking, 20, 30-year cycles, if
Mhm.
you're lucky, if you're lucky. And so again, Netflix and HBO Max, et cetera, that's been around now for 20 years and it's now becoming quite mature. And so there are certain things that go along with that maturity. Part of our team's role is to look ahead into the future. My thinking right now is at least what's the next horizon that is streaming will still be around for many, many years. I'm not saying there's going to be the decline of streaming in any stretch of imagination. In the same way, there's not, people are still watching network and broadcast TV, right?
Mhm.
But as happened historically, streaming came on and that started seeing kind of a certain trajectory to where we are today. I think we may be entering the period where this next wave might be coming. Do I know what that is exactly? No, I don't. But that is something I obviously think about and as part of our role here, try to keep our ear on the ground and try to be at the forefront of identifying what that next wave could be that might be emerging, that could eventually be as all encompassing as streaming. So we don't know what that is exactly yet, but certainly part of our team's role is
Are you
to kind of
there?
keep our ear on the ground and look at the signs of what might be emerging.
Okay, well, we're going to move to the final dig. This is all about you as a person out there in the wild. So feel free to take off your corporate hat for a moment. What is the last product or service you bought on impulse?
Okay, this is super boring. This is because I broke my elbow recently, but I got served up on Instagram, maybe because I was searching it, silicone tape to reduce scarring. I
Oh,
didn't know it was a thing.
okay.
So came from an influencer person that I follow. And yeah, she introduced me to this world of silicone tape. So that's what
Wow.
I bought.
All right. Well, it's an unfortunate way that you entered that category, but good that you found a good solve. Speaking of categories, is there a category or a brand that you could rationalize any price point for? You just have to have it in your life.
So, and unfortunately, these have gotten only more and more expensive over the years. But tickets to like a concert, a festival, a show, those are things that I could almost justify any price, and unfortunately, they are hitting those like crazy highs. So
You're an artist that you are sort of like, I splurged and I went to.
well, many of them are like festivals, but I
Yeah.
just bought Bottle Rock tickets.
Mhm,
They're in Northern California. I
mhm,
think they're going to be in like May.
mhm.
So looking forward to that. And then now thinking about a few other concerts later in the
Yeah.
year. So they're getting quite expensive, but
Yeah.
worth it in my mind.
Yeah, we hear our guests say that they'll pay a lot for experiences because you take that with you. So I'm here for it. I support it. So we know
Yeah.
that brands have distinct personalities. What's a brand that you would date and a brand that you would marry? And they don't have to be the same brand.
Okay, this is a fun one. Okay, well, how about we move categories into fashion? Something I'm kind of into and I at least know quite a few brands around. Maybe date would be maybe a brand like Zara.
Hmm.
So, a little more fast fashion. So we're gonna date Zara. And then in terms of marry and keep around forever, maybe a brand like Prada or something like that.
Yeah.
That you can keep around for a long time, very good quality, things like that.
Yeah. I think that's a long-standing one that makes a ton of sense. Is there an industry leader you think I should interview on this podcast? Who's an industry leader that you would like to see me interview on this podcast?
Okay, I'll go with a good friend and researcher. Her name is Sheila Baxter. We worked together when we started my career at Mattel. She is really one of the most creative, passionate, analytical researchers I think I've ever met. And so always have admired her work at Mattel. And then where she's gone on after that, she's worked at Kraft, Vans, Magic Leap, the VR glasses, and Samsung most recently. So she's just a powerhouse. So really admire her.
Tremendous lessons from the conversation today, Vera. So I'd love to hear from you. What keeps you inspired at work?
Yeah, I think two things. One is making sure that kind of the research and the work we do always has impact kind of on our stakeholders and our business, being able to kind of inform business decisions and strategies or at least inspire them to the degree we can. So definitely having impact. And then the second one, I love learning. And so learning from other folks on my team, from other partners, you guys, anywhere, everywhere. I think that's another thing that keeps me inspired and hopefully keeps my brain juicing.
Yeah, keep the gears turning. Well, that's phenomenal. And those brains have been on display here today. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.